Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome back, focused learners, to another explainer. Today we have a massive lore-packed topic to unpack: the jaw-dropping House of the Dragons Season 3 finale. With a realm divided, shifting loyalties, and dragons literally roaring for blood, there is a tremendous amount of ground for us to cover. To keep this all crystal clear, we're going to treat the map of Westeros like a geographic chessboard, which will really help us make sense of every brilliant tactical play and devastating tragedy. Because this finale jumps wildly across locations and lore, we'll follow a strict agenda. We're going to cover 1. The birth of a cruel queen, 2. The Harrenhal reunion, 3. Chaos at Tumbleton, 4. Helena's tragic fate, and 5. Visions of the future. Let's start unraveling these political knots. Section 1. Birth of a cruel queen, King's Landing politics. Let's look at the shifting dynamics right inside the capital. Imagine this. Queen Rhaenyra is awoken to a complete nightmare. Word is spreading like wildfire across the city that King Aegon, the man she had declared definitively dead, has miraculously returned. The small folk are understandably completely confused about who the gods actually want them to follow. This rising tension forces Rhaenyra into a drastic shift in her ruling style. When you compare King Viserys' philosophy to Queen Rhaenyra's new reign, the contrast is just stark. For years, Rhaenyra tried to emulate her father, leaning on a peaceful, even-handed, and pragmatic philosophy. But as the realm splinters, she's actively abandoning that legacy. We are witnessing the birth of Rhaenyra the Cruel. Her new Iron Fist reign is shocking. She goes so far as to order Alan of Hall to kill the High Septon simply because he refused to anoint her and chose the Faith of the Seven over her dragon rule. This pivot is perfectly captured in her own words. I strove to honor his philosophy until I saw that it would be the realm's undoing. This brilliantly illustrates Rhaenyra's active rejection of her father's mercy. She knows that to maintain absolute control, she must commit terrible acts. We see this immediate, ruthless shift when she completely blindsides and ousts her own mistress of whisperers, Mysaria, packing her off to Pentos so she won't be around to interfere with the cruelties Rhaenyra knows she must now commit. To really solidify this terrifying new grip on power, Rhaenyra turns to ancient lore. She stands outside the Grand Sept and publicly calls upon the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, which is a secret usually passed down strictly from ruler to ruler. She announces herself as the prince that was promised. Now keep in mind, in Old Valyrian, prince is a completely gender-neutral term. She is proclaiming herself the prophesied savior meant to unite the entire realm against a looming northern darkness. But here is the really provocative question we have to ask ourselves. Does Rhaenyra truly believe this prophecy, or is this just a masterful manipulation of the small folk? Think about it. She delivers this grand, sweeping title in Old Valyrian, a language the common people don't even speak. It's a brilliant tactical play to legitimize her rule through divine right, but it absolutely leaves us wondering if she's bought into her own absolute mythos. Section 2. The Harrenhal Reunion. Ghosts and Curses. Let's shift our chessboard over to the eerie atmosphere of the Riverlands. Now, what's really interesting about Alice River's dark backstory is her revelation that she was the mother to Harren Hoare's child, and that child was actually burned to death by the Targaryen dragon Balerion over 120 years ago, all the way back during Aegon the Conqueror's invasion. Stripped of her name and castle, she was cursed to live within those castle bounds forever, serving its future lords. The wild irony here is just palpable. Her family was completely decimated by a Targaryen, yet now here she is constantly saving and aiding Targaryen men like Aegon, literally pulling him back from the brink of death. So it's right under this cursed roof that Aemond, who is heavily haunted by guilt, discovers his brother Aegon is actually alive. You'd expect a violent confrontation, right? But instead, Aemond completely humbles himself. He begs for forgiveness, which radically shifts their entire dynamic. Aegon realizes he needs Aemond's massive dragon, so he lays out a crystal-clear, 3-step game plan for revenge. First, find Vhagar. Second, travel to Tumbleton to align forces with Ormond and Dyron. And third, march straight on King's Landing to execute Rhaenyra. They are gearing up for absolute war. Section 3. Chaos at Tumbleton. The Reach erupts. Let's move over to our third theater of war to see how this strategy actually unfolds on the ground. Let's untangle this giant mess of shifting allegiances among the newly empowered dragon seeds right as the bloody Battle of Tumbleton erupts. First, you have Ulf, who has fully turned cloak to the Greens after being humiliated and promised a lordship. Then there's Hugh Hammer, who is deeply conflicted. He defied orders and stormed King's Landing only to find his wife slain. Meanwhile, Adam and Aelin of Hull remain strictly loyal to the Blacks. Aelin even makes the tough choice to honor Rhaenyra's Valyrian demands in King's Landing rather than marching to Tumbleton to save his own lord, Corlys Velaryon. Amidst all this chaos in a burning town, two vastly different approaches to the war collide. On one side, Gwaine Hightower suggests an unbooked, Hail Mary diplomatic alliance. He wants to wed Daeron to Rhaena to seal the breach and avert any more bloodshed. But then you contrast that with Daemon Targaryen. For Daemon, strength is literally the only language that matters. He violently rejects the idea of a peaceful alliance. He demands utter submission, famously unleashing his dragon Caraxes to just completely burn down the front gate of Tumbleton. Section 4. Helena's tragic fate. Return to the capital. We have to examine a heartbreaking, heavily foreshadowed conclusion. Before her death, Queen Helena experienced 4 distinct visions mapping out her future. She saw herself outside the Red Keep, then giving birth in a meadow, feeding chickens, and finally atop her dragon Dreamfire in the Dragon Pit. What's absolutely crucial to understand here is that Helena wasn't seeing one cohesive, linear future. She was a dreamer trapped in a cage, viewing multiple potential paths her life could take. The sheer tragedy is that every single one of these paths ultimately ended in her suicide by jumping from her window into the spiked moat below. This actually brings us to a fascinating metacontextual fact behind the scenes. The author George R.R. Martin publicly warned the showrunners about a toxic butterfly effect. You see, in the original books, Helena's suicide is directly triggered by the brutal death of her 3-year-old son Maelor. But because the show chose to exclude Maelor entirely, it created some real-world tension about how the writers would logically reach Helena's tragic end without that primary catalyst. So how did the showrunners respond to that tension? Well, when Alicent returns to King's Landing, she sees literal blue butterflies flying free in the air. This isn't just a beautiful visual metaphor for Helena finding freedom in death. It actually acts as a sly, metaphorical dialogue straight from the writers back to George R.R. Martin, essentially saying, "Look, George, we did it. We just got there a different way." Section 5. Visions of the Future, the Embroidery. We've seen the past and the present, but let's decode what is to come. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what awaits Rhaenyra. Helena left behind a final piece of artwork for the queen to discover, and it prophesies sheer disaster. You have Rhaenyra on the Iron Throne completely covered in blood, which hints at that old superstition that those who bleed on the throne are unworthy or illegitimate. Then, there are white and black hands against rising flames, heavily foreshadowing a devastating smallfolk uprising. We also see floating eyes warning of Rhaenyra's impending, crippling paranoia and betrayal. And finally, a green dragon pointing to a deadly aerial clash. Literally, every single stitch is a warning of downfall. All of this leaves us with one incredibly heavy question. With allegiances shifting by the hour, rulers embracing absolute cruelty, and the realm literally burning to ash, who will ultimately survive the Dance of the Dragons? The board is set for an absolutely catastrophic 4th season. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep questioning, and I will see you next time as we continue to break down these fascinating stories.